that brings us to the fourth assumption, that China wants to disarm North Korea. We want the Chinese to help us disarm North Korea. It's in China's interest to disarm North Korea. But unfortunately, there are disturbing implications that the Chinese are in fact arming their neighbor. On April 15th, we witnessed a very large canister paraded through the center of Pyongyang during the Kim Il-sung parade. That canister was Chinese in origin, from what we can tell, and it's the canister that the Chinese used to carry their DF-41 missile. A DF-41 has a range of at least 8,700 miles, putting all of the American homeland in a range. Now, this, of course, is not to say conclusively that the Chinese gave the North Koreans the DF-41. After all, the North Koreans could have paraded an empty canister. The North Koreans could have stolen the plans from the Chinese. Or the North Koreans could have gotten the plans for the missile from a country to which China proliferated the missile, perhaps Pakistan. But the parading of this ominous-looking canister should lead the administration in Washington to start asking Beijing some pointed questions. And while they're at it, the international community should ask China where North Korea got the missile that it successfully tested on May 21. The missile tested on May 21 is the same that they tested February 12. Both of those are land-based missiles. The February 12th missile looks to be a variant of the missile that the North Koreans tested on August 24th from below the surface of the Sea of Japan. And the missile that the North Koreans tested on August 24th, that looks an awful lot like China's JL-1 submarine-launched missile. Are you noticing a pattern? That missiles that look like they're Chinese are mysteriously showing up in North Korea's inventory. And there's some more bad news. The canister we saw on April 15th, it was being paraded through the heart of the North Korean capital on a Chinese vehicle. The 16-wheel vehicle, we know where it came from. It was manufactured by Sanjiang Special Vehicle Corporation, which is a unit of China Aerospace Science and Industry Corp. CASIC, as China Aerospace is known, is closely connected with China's People's Liberation Army. Moreover, that enterprise also transferred the chassis for the transporter erector launcher that the North Koreans used for their KN-08, a three-stage missile. We know that because Beijing admitted it in 2012. The New York Times reports that Chinese officials told their American counterparts that they sold the chassis to the North Koreans because the North Koreans said they wanted the chassis for logging vehicles. Now, that explanation doesn't make sense on many levels, but one thing we can point out is that those chassis are wider than the roads in North Korea's logging areas. And indeed, American intelligence officials will privately tell you that the story is worse than what the New York Times said. Intelligence officials will tell you that the Obama administration talked to the Chinese before the sale of the chassis, and Beijing went ahead anyway. My sense, I can't prove it, but my sense is that the Chinese not only sold the chassis for these transporter erector launchers, but they also sold the rest of the vehicle. In other words, the missile interface. And supplying the vehicle is critical because it makes North Korea a real threat to the American homeland. We are not concerned about North Korea's longest range missile being used as a weapon. That's the Taepodong-2 or the Taepodong-3, depending who you talk to. The Taepodongs take weeks to transport, to assemble, to fuel and test. We can kill them on the pad. But these other missiles are real threats because they're mobile. Because they're mobile, they can hide. Because they can hide, we cannot, with any assurance, kill them before they are launched at us. And the intercontinental ballistic missiles that North Korea tested on July 4th and July 28th, they rode to their launch sites on Chinese vehicles as well. China, we have to conclude, is weaponizing North Korea, giving it the capability to kill Americans by the tens of millions. And by the way, just for completing the conversation, The Chinese have also been supplying components, equipment, and materials for North Korea's nuclear weapons program. The flow of materials from China to North Korea has occurred over the course of decades and cannot be anything other than a result of conscious policy in Beijing.